چند تا حرکت نرمشی اساسی میخوام بهتون آموزش بدم که قبل از ورزش انجام بدید و هر حرکتی رو حدود 15 تا 20 بار انجام بدید.
Don't move nothing, statue. Shoot about to go nuts, catch you. Need cash off the books, past due. Real cheese for the cooks, rap food. He got drums for that ass, get fucked. Get your face rearranged, nip tuck. Dude heavy in the streets, big truck. Get money, that's a stick up. The wallet of your life, choose one. Come up off the lettuce, crouton. You been sleeping on the shooters. Futon, no donation on computers, move on. Clerk shitting in his drawers, skid row. Thought the shit was just a hood game, skip rope. Shooter read the face real quick, Cliff's notes. Kiss the shoe with the 4-5 mistletoe. Shooter, 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 shooter. You don't want it with a shooter. Shooter, shooter, shooter. Cause he got guns and the shit go bang. Yeah, the shooter brought guns and the shit go bang. Hands up, got guns and this bitch go bang. Motherfucker better run when the shit go.
Onto Twitter to sift through pictures of anime girls and curvy memes like I do every other day of my life, only to discover, once again, another mass shooting had taken place. As callous as it may sound, I've honestly run dry on empathy for the victims of these atrocities because, while horrible, they happen with such frequency, I really can't spare any, and whatever I could muster gets ground up in the resulting conversation about how to stop the epidemic. The only real way to survive the news cycle these days is to give into the primal urge and find a modicum of entertainment in all the horror. But this wasn't just a madman in a school zone or just a tard from R9K with a pressure cooker. This one hit home. It's not a stretch to say YouTube is the biggest thing to happen to entertainment since the proliferation of television. The bar was lowered so substantially that all of a sudden anyone could make anything and discover an audience for it, one large enough to justify the time sink if not support them entirely. Maybe a fickle business, but it's a hell of an entertaining one. I spend most of my time watching YouTube. Even when I'm playing video games, there's usually something running on my laptop by my side. And that's part of the reason why I'm more sympathetic than most of my audience when it comes to Patreon and e-begging. I want these people to succeed, and deep down I want to be able to make some cash myself from this someday. That might be why I wasn't really surprised when the news came that someone had shot up YouTube headquarters. I knew it was coming. From me, Bombastic Blake, Patreon link below. But also from Nasim Najah Ogdam, a 38-year-old Iranian woman who had enough with the apocalypse and decided to file a complaint personally. If you've never heard of Nasim, that's not surprising. Her channels were just above the 10,000 sub mark each, not together. But she wasn't a complete nobody. A few of her videos reached into the hundreds of thousands in terms of views, and she had been something of a meme on the Persian section of the internet since 2015. A native Iranian, Nasim moved to America with her family in 1996, but continued to post virtually all of her videos in her native tongue. This might seem surprising, but there are dozens of communities that post on YouTube in their own language, with a completely different set of rules and algorithms to deal with. Videos that can be accessed through the search bar, but will never be recommended to you if you speak English. It's actually a lot easier for foreign YouTubers to get a start, as they usually have less to compete with, since the English parts of YouTube might as well not exist for them. Nasim made a living off of her YouTube videos, but it wasn't a very good one, and she made that clear in one of her mini MS Paint projects where she laments only getting 10 cents for a video with over 300,000 views, and believes her radical beliefs have led to YouTube singling her out and censoring her. Radical beliefs is a bit of a loaded term these days, so I should specify Nasim's beliefs weren't religious. She was actually Baha'i, a kind of new age religion in the Middle East that believed multiple religions had pieces of a bigger puzzle. Her radical beliefs skewed more along the lines of Greenpeace, mainly protesting animal cruelty and promoting veganism. At first glance, a vegan mass shooter is just a tad bit ironic, but I've noticed something of a trend with the more intense vegan, namely a particular strand of sociopathy directed at people as a group. A lot of vegans hold a kind of societal nihilism. Humanity is destroying the environment and they're a net negative, blah blah blah, which is a little more acceptable than pure sociopathy. And then they overcompensate with a deluge of empathy for animals to mask how cold and unfeeling they are. Of course, everything's got to go at some point, and if you wear a mask of righteous nihilism, taking out those you perceive as wrong in you might start to look pretty appealing. We've got a pretty solid timeline of Nassim's rampage. On April 2nd, her family reports her missing as she leaves her grandma's home in San Diego to travel 500 miles to San Bruno, where YouTube headquarters are. Notably, her family were aware of her problems with YouTube, or at least they claim to be. The police actually contradicts this and say that they never brought it up to them specifically. Around 1 in the morning, police in San Bruno found Nassim sleeping in her car, and after questioning her, took her out of the missing persons database. A few hours later, she visited a gun range, and at noon, she snuck into YouTube HQ through the parking garage, shot 3 people, and then committed suicide. Altogether, from the time she arrived to the time she was found dead was under 10 minutes. And then things got weird. As you might expect, it doesn't take long for word to spread that someone shot up the campus of one of the biggest companies in the world, and before YouTube itself could find her channels and nuke them, they'd been backed up. It helped that Nassim was mirroring her own videos on other social media sites like Telegram. Nassim's content was unpleasant. If Tim and Eric thought they were making high art, it might come out like her videos. You see, Nassim wasn't merely a YouTuber, she was an artist. And like all great artists, she was obtuse. I honest to God can't tell you what any of Nassim's videos mean, and trust me, I've spent way more time decoding way dumber shit than this. I'd hesitate to say people were infatuated with Nassim, but they were certainly intrigued. A shooter's always going to get some attention, but in this economy, you gotta have a hook if you want to compete for the attention of the zeitgeist as a whole. Maybe Nassim wasn't shooting people for ghost pussy, but a decade of creepy exercise tapes isn't half bad. Sadly, and I use the term loosely, Nassim didn't have much staying power. The immediate weirdness was entertaining and softened the blow, but it really wasn't anything more than an eye catch. Barely a week had gone by and Nassim's assault has died down, with only the usual crop of rudimentary think pieces remaining. A big part of this is that Nassim just doesn't fit the narrative news outlets want. Making a video on internet weirdos taught me without a beginning, middle, and end, even the news just sort of drags and not everyone fits that mold. For a 2 to 3 hour podcast, that was tough, but it's usually not so difficult for a few days of half-page reports. Even so, Nassim just wasn't enough. The left wants a white guy with a machine gun, the right wants a brown guy with a garbage truck. Nassim was neither. She was an Iranian woman who used a legally owned handgun for her dirty work, and while both sides could spin it, it was a lot easier to focus on the fallout of last month's Parkland shooting. Beyond this, Nassim was just a shitty shooter. On the scoreboard, she ranks dead last, tied only with the people who can barely make the local paper for trying. The only person who died in Nassim's attack was herself. Though she hit 3 people, as far as I can tell, all 3 survived. This isn't to say Nassim didn't inflict damage. Those 3 still had to be hospitalized, and she dealt untold trauma on the employees at Google and their families, but sadly, before the month is up, there's probably going to be a bigger body count to report on. Officially, police give Nassim's motive as the demonetization of her videos and her anger at what she perceived as censorship, but I think that's kind of a narrow view. Officially, police give Nassim's motive as the demonetization of her videos and her anger at what she perceived as censorship, but I think that's kind of a narrow view. Nassim last saw her family on March 31st, and they reported her missing on April 2nd. That's just after the 24-hour wait period is over when reporting an adult missing. I have a feeling that if they could have, they would have reported her missing sooner. Even if they weren't aware with her issues at YouTube like the police claim, that's still strong evidence that she had a good familiar support system, which is missing from most shooters. Well, it might seem ridiculous that Nassim was actually getting pennies for hundreds of thousands of views. It's important to take into account all the factors that make up what you actually make from a video. On average, you get back about 1/10 of the views in dollars, so a 300,000 video is only going to get you back 300, assuming all of those views are from 1 month. On top of this, the adpocalypse took a huge chunk of that cash away to the point that much bigger YouTubers were making roughly the same amount of money on bigger videos. This isn't to mention all of Nassim's vids were in Farsi, which limited her advertising pool, and they were age restricted. All those factors decimated her potential income basically down to nothing. Finally, and in my eyes most importantly, Nassim was on the verge of middle age. Though she's often reported as being 38, Nassim was actually 37 when she died. Her birthday was the day after the shooting. She was soon going to be faced with the reality that she had wasted a decade of her life on a website she believes singles her out for failure. Nassim was also living with her grandmother, and no matter how you cut it, that's more than a bit pathetic. From her point of view, Nassim likely thought she was finally enacting the change she had been fighting for all her life. It's unlikely she did much in her time with PETA or converted many through her YouTube videos, but maybe an act of random violence would show them not to mess with the little guy, even though it didn't. All it did was traumatize dozens, maybe hundreds of people. Ultimately, the only permanent damage Nassim did was to herself, and that makes it a little easier to joke about. By the end of the year, despite attacking one of the most important communication hubs in the world, Nassim will be forgotten. A footnote. In a decade, when someone goes back and analyzes the bizarre epidemic of mass shootings through the 2010s, she probably won't even be included. It doesn't take a big body count to be a monster, but it sure takes one to be remembered.